On one quiet afternoon, a racist gang thought they were hunters. They didn't know they had walked into the cage of a lioness. It was a hot afternoon in the countryside of Georgia. The cicadas screeched in the tall grass, and a dry wind carried the smell of dust over the fields. On that land stood a quiet farm, with its old wooden fences and a red barn that looked tired from years of sun. To anyone passing by, it was just another farm owned by a middle-aged black woman trying to live her life in peace. But what outsiders never knew was that this land held a story far deeper than the cracked paint on the barn walls. Welcome to Black Community Stories. Make sure you like and subscribe for your top-notch stories. The woman's name was Clara Daniels. Neighbors knew her as polite, calm, and hard-working. She raised chickens, grew corn, and tended goats on her wide acres. But beneath that soft presence lived a history carved in shadows and silence. Clara was not just a farmer. She was once Sergeant Clara Daniels, the Marine sniper whose name carried whispers in war zones far from American soil. But she never told her neighbors, never boasted, never even hung her medals. She simply lived. On that sweltering afternoon, however, trouble was on the road. A convoy of trucks and bikes, painted with graffiti and flags, rumbled down the dirt road leading to Clara's farm. Their laughter was loud, wild, and cruel. This was the Iron Sons, a racist gang that had been stirring trouble in nearby towns. They had broken windows, harassed families, and spray-painted hateful words across churches, and now they had chosen Clara's farm. Dust rose behind them as they drove in like a pack of wolves. Engines roared, boots thudded on the dirt, and the air filled with curses and laughter. At least 15 of them jumped off their vehicles, some holding bats, others chains, and a few had rifles slung across their backs. Their leader, a heavy man with a scar running from his ear to his chin, spit into the dirt and grinned. "Let's burn this place down," he said, his voice sharp and ugly. "Teach her what happens when people like her try to live among us." Inside her farmhouse, Clara heard the engines before she saw the dust. She set down the basket of eggs she had been carrying. Her hands did not tremble. She walked calmly to the window, pulled back the curtain, and watched. She saw them, loud, reckless, proud in their ignorance. Her eyes narrowed. She recognized their type. She had seen men like them in deserts, jungles, and ruined cities, swaggering until the sound of a rifle cut the noise out of their throats. She breathed slow. Her hands itched not from fear, but from memory. The gang spread out across her land, kicking over feed buckets, smashing fence posts, scaring her animals. Chickens scattered, goats bleated in panic, and laughter filled the air. One man fired a shotgun blast into the air just to watch the flock scatter. Clara did not flinch. The scar-faced leader shouted, "Come out, woman! You're done here! This is our land now!" She stood still for a moment, her reflection in the glass calm as water. Then she walked to her bedroom. In the corner, hidden under a faded quilt, was a long black case. She placed it gently on the bed and clicked it open. Inside lay her old rifle, polished, cared for, waiting. The weight of it in her hands was like shaking hands with an old friend. The steel was cold, steady, honest. She ran a finger along the scope, the same scope that had once marked targets half a mile away in foreign lands. Clara exhaled, steady, like she had done 1,000 times before. Outside, the gang had grown bolder. They were near her barn now, laughing as they threw rocks at the windows. One of them poured gasoline from a can. The the stench cutting through the afternoon heat. Another gang member shouted, "Light it up!" Clara walked slowly to the back porch. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She simply stepped into the sunlight, her rifle in her hands. The laughter stopped for a second as they saw her. One of them smirked and yelled, "What do you think you're going to do with that, old lady?" Her eyes, calm and sharp, locked on him. Clara said nothing. The silence that followed was heavy, tense, and full of something they could not name. Before we dive in deeply, let us know in the comments what country or which city you're watching this story from. We'd love to know how far this story travels. The air hung thick with dust and tension as Clara Daniels stood on the porch with her rifle. The gang members froze for a moment, staring at her as if unsure whether to laugh or be cautious. Then one of them, a tall, skinny man with tattoos covering his arms, stepped forward and spit into the dirt. "She ain't got the guts," he said, grinning at the others. "She's just some farmer." A few of them laughed, emboldened by his words. One cracked his knuckles, another tapped the side of his shotgun. The scar-faced leader didn't laugh, though. He kept his eyes on Clara, chewing something in his mouth, watching her too closely. Clara didn't blink. She didn't move. She simply adjusted her grip on the rifle, her finger resting near the trigger but not on it. Years of discipline held her still. The goats had huddled in the far corner of the pen. The chickens had gone silent, and even the cicadas outside seemed to have hushed. The whole land waited. Finally, the leader barked, "Don't just stand there. Burn it." The tattooed man pulled out a lighter, flipped it open, and bent toward the gasoline-soaked side of the barn. Clara raised the rifle to her shoulder so fast the movement was like lightning. The man froze, the flame trembling in his hand. "Drop it," Clara said, her voice calm, almost soft, but it cut through the air like steel. The laughter stopped. The only sound was the low growl of engines still idling in the driveway. The man hesitated, then smirked again. "You don't got the—" The crack of the rifle silenced him. The bullet struck the dirt 2 inches from his boot, sending dust exploding into his leg. He stumbled back, the lighter clattering from his hand. The gang members jumped, some cursing, others shouting in shock. Clara's eyes never wavered. "The next one won't miss." The scar-faced leader raised a hand to quiet his men. His grin faded slightly, replaced by something harder. He studied Clara like a man recognizing something he hadn't expected. "You think you can scare us off?" he asked. His voice was lower now, edged with caution. Clara didn't answer. Her silence was its own warning. One of the younger gang members, jittery with adrenaline, lifted his rifle halfway. "We could take her, boss," he shouted. "She's just one woman." Clara's scope turned toward him. She didn't fire, not yet, but the way her hands moved, smooth, professional, steady, made the boy pale. He lowered his weapon again. The leader barked at him, "Stand down, fool," then turned back to Clara. "All right, old lady. I don't know who you think you are, but you don't scare me. We've run people like you off their land before." Clara's jaw tightened just slightly. She had heard words like that in foreign tongues, from men who had thought their numbers would save them. She had seen their arrogance crumble. The leader motioned to his men. "Fan out, surround the house. Let's see how tough she is when we come at her from all sides." The gang began to spread, moving toward the farmhouse in a loose circle. Clara stepped back slowly into the shadows of the porch, keeping her rifle raised. Her heart was steady, her breathing measured. Every inch of her training came back without thought. She knew the angles of her land, the cover spots, the lines of fire. Inside, she moved to the front window, crouched low, and aimed. The scar-faced leader had stayed near the trucks, barking orders. He was careful, she noticed. He let the others move first. Cowards always did. A crash sounded near the side of the barn. Two of the men had kicked the door open. The animals shrieked inside, panicked. Clara's teeth clenched, but she didn't fire yet. She couldn't waste ammunition. Every bullet had to count. Another group of men crept along the fence line toward the back porch, their chains dragging against the posts. Their laughter was nervous now, forced. One muttered, "She ain't gonna shoot us all," but his voice cracked when Clara's shadow flickered across the window. She moved like a ghost inside the house, always a step ahead, always watching. Suddenly, glass shattered. One of the men hurled a brick through a side window, sending shards flying across Clara's kitchen floor. Another raised his bat, ready to smash his way in. Clara's rifle barked. The wooden handle of the bat exploded in half, splinters raining down on the man's hands. He screamed, stumbling back. His friend cursed and dove for cover. The sound echoed across the farm, rolling into the empty fields. For the first time, the gang realized this wasn't just some farmer they were dealing with. Still, they didn't retreat. Not yet. Pride was a poison, and it ran deep in men like them. The scar-faced leader cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "You think you're safe in there? We'll smoke you out." Clara shifted her scope again, her eyes cold as glass. The battlefield had just begun. The dry afternoon sun cast long shadows across Clara Daniels' farm, cutting sharp lines across the dirt and broken fences. The gang had spread out, circling like vultures, their boots crunching against the gravel, their chains clinking like cruel bells. Clara moved quietly through her farmhouse, her rifle cradled as naturally as a part of her body. Her breathing never faltered, her eyes never wavered. Another crash came from the barn, wood splintering, animals crying out. Two of the gang members had dragged open the doors fully now, laughing as they kicked at the feed sacks and tossed hay bales aside. One of them pulled a spray can from his jacket and painted ugly words across the barn wall. The other lifted a torch, striking it with a lighter. From her upstairs window, Clara zeroed in through her scope. The torch flickered, the flame dancing inches from the dry hay. She didn't wait. The rifle cracked. The torch went spinning out of his hand, clattering into the dirt. The man howled, clutching his shoulder, his screams breaking the gang's forced laughter. "Sniper!" one of them shouted, panic cutting through his bravado. The word hung in the air like thunder. Suddenly all their confidence slipped. They had thought they were hunting an old farmer. Now, for the first time, they realized something else entirely. She was hunting them. The scar-faced leader snarled, but his eyes darted nervously toward the windows. "Spread out. Keep moving. Don't stand still." His voice was sharp, commanding, but the crack in it betrayed him. Clara shifted, steady as stone. Her rifle followed another man creeping by the goat pen. She waited until his head rose above the fence line, then fired. The bullet splintered the wooden post inches from his cheek. He fell backward with a cry, scrambling in the dirt, clutching his face though she hadn't touched him. Fear did more damage than any wound. Meanwhile, three of the gang tried to rush the back porch together. Clara was already there, crouched low behind the window. The first man kicked the screen door open, chain swinging in his hand. Clara pulled the trigger. The chain snapped in half mid-swing, the broken metal clanging to the floor. "Fall back!" another yelled, diving behind the tractor parked near the shed. The land itself seemed to work in Clara's favor. Every corner of it she knew by heart, every shadow, every post, every sound. To them, it was just dirt and barns. To her, it was terrain. One of the young boys, barely more than 20, was pressed against the side of the chicken coop, shaking. "Man, we got to go," he whispered. "She's crazy. She's picking us off like nothing." The scar-faced leader grabbed him by the collar and shoved him forward. "Shut your mouth and move. We didn't come this far to run from some woman." His pride burned hotter than his fear, but his eyes kept flicking to the farmhouse. He knew. Somewhere inside, he knew this wasn't going to be easy. From the barn, the wounded man still screamed, his blood dripping into the hay. Two of his friends tried to drag him out, but Clara's scope was already watching. She didn't fire this time. She didn't have to. Her silence was louder than a gunshot. The men kept glancing at the farmhouse window, jerking their heads nervously. Then came a different sound, an engine revving. One of the bikers had jumped back onto his motorcycle and gunned it toward the farmhouse. He leaned low, speeding across the dirt, shouting, "I'll run her down." Clara didn't move until the last second. She stepped out onto the porch again, her figure sharp in the sunlight, calm and unshaken. The biker roared closer, dust spraying behind his tires. At the exact moment he raised a bat in his hand, Clara fired. The front tire blew out instantly. The bike flipped, throwing the rider across the dirt like a rag doll. He hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop, groaning in pain. The bike skidded and lay smoking a few feet from the porch. The farm was no longer their playground. It was a battlefield. The others screamed curses, shooting wildly toward the house, their bullets shattering wood, breaking windows, tearing chunks out of the porch. Clara ducked back inside, calm even as shards rained around her. She moved upstairs, reloaded smoothly, and took her position again. The gang was breaking. She could hear it in their voices, see it in the way they scrambled instead of marched, hid instead of advanced. Still their leader roared, "Don't stop. Don't let her think she's winning." But Clara wasn't thinking of winning or losing. She was thinking only of survival, hers, her animals, her lands. And with each pull of her trigger, she reminded them that they had stepped onto the wrong farm. The smell of gasoline still lingered in the air, mixed with dust and gunpowder. The once quiet farm was alive with chaos, broken fences, panicked animals, and men shouting over one another, their earlier arrogance crumbling into raw fear. From her upstairs window, Clara Daniels kept her scope steady, eyes narrowing as she tracked the gang across her land. Her finger rested near the trigger, patient, calculating. She wasn't firing to scare anymore. Each shot was a message, and they were starting to read it. Below, two of the men tried crawling through the tall grass near the shed, thinking they could sneak around unseen. Clara exhaled slowly and squeezed. The bullet split the ground between them, close enough for dirt to spray their faces. Both men flattened instantly, one dropping his gun in panic. "She's watching everything," one hissed, trembling. Clara shifted her aim again, her movements calm, almost mechanical. In her mind, the battlefield wasn't Georgia farmland. It was Fallujah. It was Kabul. It was the places where shadows moved and survival meant being colder than fear. The scar-faced leader, pacing near the trucks, was growing restless. He barked orders, but the cracks in his voice betrayed him. "Get closer. She can't cover all sides at once." A cluster of men obeyed, sprinting toward the barn. They smashed another window, shouting curses, trying to draw her fire. Clara didn't bite. Instead, she scanned the edge of the field where another group was circling wide. They thought they were clever, moving low with rifles in hand. Clara adjusted, aimed, and fired. One rifle clattered into the dirt as its owner screamed, clutching his arm. His partners dove for cover, dragging him behind a fallen log. Panic spread like fire in dry grass. Still they pushed. Pride was louder than reason. Another pair ran toward the porch, one holding a Molotov cocktail in his hand. He lit it, flame curling inside the glass. Clara tracked him through her scope, waiting for the throw. The bottle left his hand, spinning through the air toward her porch. Clara's bullet met it mid-flight. The Molotov exploded in the air, raining fire harmlessly onto the dirt. The would-be thrower fell back in horror, his face lit by the flames. The gang erupted in shouts, some enraged, others panicked. "Boss, we can't fight her like this," one of them screamed, his voice cracking. Scarface grabbed him by the collar, shoving him hard. "Shut up, we outnumber her. She can't shoot us all." But the leader's eyes betrayed him. He had begun to realize what kind of opponent they had stumbled into. Clara, hidden again behind the shattered window, reloaded calmly. Her breathing stayed steady. Her hands, though older now, were still precise. Every action was muscle memory. She had spent years perfecting the art of patience, the discipline of waiting. Another gang member, trembling but desperate, tried to charge the front door with a sledgehammer. He barely made it halfway across the yard before Clara's shot took the head off the hammer, the heavy steel chunk flying into the dirt. The man froze in disbelief, staring at the broken handle in his hands, then scrambled away. By now, the animals had grown frantic, the goats bleating, chickens flapping wildly, even the horses in the far pen stomping against their rails. Clara's heart clenched briefly at their cries, but she couldn't move to calm them. Her focus had to stay sharp. The gang regrouped near the trucks. Some crouched behind the wheels, others pressed low against the dirt. Their pride was turning into desperation. A few whispered, arguing whether to retreat or press on. But the scar-faced leader wasn't ready to back down. His reputation depended on this raid. He raised his rifle, pointed it at the farmhouse, and screamed, "We'll burn it all to the ground with her inside." At his signal, a barrage of gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into the house, splintering wood, shattering glass, ripping through walls. The farmhouse shook with the impact, dust raining from the ceiling. Clara dropped low, moving through the hall, bullets whistling past as she crawled to the opposite window. She knew their tactic. They wanted to pin her down, force her into panic. But Clara had lived through worse. She moved quick and silent, setting herself at another angle. When the firing paused for a reload, she struck back. 1, 2, 3 shots. Each bullet forced a man to the ground, screaming or diving for cover. The chaos silenced them again, and Clara slipped back into shadow. The scar-faced leader's face twisted in rage. He fired his gun into the air, screaming, "Drag her out! Smoke her out! I don't care how!" A new danger rose. 2 men sprinted toward the barn again, not with weapons this time, but with more cans of gasoline. Their plan was clear. If they couldn't get her out with bullets, they'd burn everything she had. Clara steadied her rifle, her eyes narrowing. The battlefield wasn't done shifting. The heat pressed down harder as the two men sprinted toward Clara's barn with their cans of gasoline. They thought if they burned her farm, they'd break her spirit. But Clara Daniels's spirit had been forged in deserts, sharpened in jungles, and tested in places where men like them never lasted a day. Her scope found the first man's arm as he unscrewed the cap of the gasoline can. She exhaled, squeezed. The shot tore through the metal, gasoline spilling over his clothes. He cursed, stumbling, reeking of fumes. His partner froze mid-step, wide-eyed. Clara's second shot rang out, the ground erupting near his boot. Both dropped their cans and scrambled back, fear replacing bravado. The scar-faced leader roared, his voice breaking as he watched his plan crumble. "Cowards! She's just one woman. Keep moving!" But the gang no longer believed him. Their eyes darted constantly to the windows, to the barn roof, to the porch, anywhere she might be. She had become invisible, everywhere and nowhere, a shadow that cut with steel precision. From inside the house, Clara moved down the stairs, her boots silent against the creaking wood. She wasn't just defending her home anymore. She was dismantling them, piece by piece. Her every step was deliberate, her every angle chosen. At the front, 3 men bunched together behind the old tractor, whispering their fear. Clara aimed through a crack in the door and fired. The bullet struck the metal beside them, ringing like a bell. All 3 bolted in different directions, their courage snapping. By now, the gang was in pieces, some hiding behind their vehicles, others huddled in the grass, none daring to make the next move. The scar-faced leader knew his men were finished. His pride burned hotter than reason, though, and he refused to back down. He gripped his rifle tight, rage flashing in his eyes. "You think you can take us all?" he screamed at the farmhouse. "Come out here and fight like a real soldier." The word soldier cut through the chaos like a blade. Clara's jaw clenched. She had fought more battles than he could imagine. She had lost friends, seen the cost of war, and she had earned every scar and every quiet day she had tried to live in peace since. Slowly, Clara stepped out onto the porch again, rifle resting in her hands, her eyes locked on him, calm, steady, unblinking. "You brought war to my home," she said, her voice low, carrying across the silent farm. For the first time, doubt flickered across his scarred face. He raised his rifle, finger twitching on the trigger. But Clara's years of training weren't about hesitation. Her shot rang out, sharp and final. His weapon flew from his hands as he staggered back, falling into the dust. He lay there, clutching his bleeding shoulder, screaming in rage and pain. The silence that followed was heavy. The remaining gang members stared, wide-eyed, their courage gone, their leader broken. One by one, they dropped their weapons. Some ran to their trucks, scrambling inside, engines roaring to life. Others fled on foot, disappearing down the dirt road they had come from, dust rising in their wake. Clara didn't chase. She didn't need to. The message had been carved into them with every shot. This farm was not theirs to take. She lowered her rifle, the weight familiar but heavy now. Around her, the animals slowly calmed, their cries fading. Smoke from the shattered Molotov still curled faintly in the dirt. The farmhouse bore scars, shattered windows, broken wood, but it still stood. Clara exhaled, steady, her heartbeat finally slowing. She knew they would tell stories about this day, and she knew none of them would ever return. The battlefield was silent once more, and the farm was hers again. The end. Please like and subscribe for more rich stories like this. comment below. Also, if you really loved this video and want to support the channel directly, you can hit that super thanks button below.